Hearty welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining for today's webinar organized by the Department of Computer Application, SDM College of Business Management, Bangalore. The pandemic silver lining is a chance to experiment with technologies and cooperative approaches across borders that could lead to safer, more sustainable, and more inclusive global future. It is forcing all of us to appreciate how much we rely on 21st century's technologies, the artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, social media, digital learning platforms, augmented and virtual reality, drones, 3D printing, and so much more to keep us healthy and to transform economies. Keeping this in mind, the Computer Application Department of SDM College of Business Management decided to organize one-day international webinar on the topic Tech for Good, using technology to make a better world. At the outset, I welcome our principal, Professor Aruna P. Kamal, who has supported us to organize this webinar. I extend a warm welcome to our resource person, Mr. Rakesh Hegde, who is the head of Global Customer Success at editcast.com, based in California, USA. It gives me immense pleasure in welcoming all the participants who are eagerly waiting for today's session. It's my privilege to introduce today's presenter, Mr. Rakesh Hegde, to the gathering. He is the head of Global Customer Success at editcast.com, based in Mountain View, California, USA. A seasoned Silicon Valley technology leader with more than 25 years of experience. Sir has built high-performance, customer-centric organizations that deliver significant business value. Previously, he was the founder and CEO of Resopia, an award-winning enterprise SaaS ERP platform, which was acquired by Sonata Software. Over his 2 decades of working career, he has worked with companies like Virgin Atlantic, Saba, VMware, Queensland Rail Australia, Blue Shield of California, delivering enterprise solutions across the globe. Apart from being a technology geek, he is an avid runner and has more than a dozen marathons under his belt and has been a past president of School Force, a Silicon Valley non-profit education foundation. We are happy and honored to have an eminent personality with us today and looking forward for a fruitful session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. So thanks. I'm glad to see so many of you in this webinar here today. I know it's a difficult time right now with everybody remote. So I'm pretty glad to see so many of you joining a webinar. It's a completely different experience to have a conversation remotely versus a real-time webinar or real-time face-to-face conversations. So thank you all for coming here. And thanks for that pretty introduction. So today, uh, it's around 45-50 minute of talk. There are a few interesting topics that I want to cover, and we'll do questions at the end. Let me share my screen. Basic principles. I really want to focus on SDG, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. These are something that I feel should be closer to a lot of different people. It does affect everyone globally. It's a phenomenal approach that United Nations took, uh, and I feel especially countries like India has a major impact in all of that. And then the goal is, how is technology actually impacting this? I'm going to skip this slide. You've already mentioned about myself. I do want to say that I'm an SDM alumni, so I'm pretty proud to be talking to a bunch of SDM folks. Like I said, today's topic is, how does technology play a pivotal role in transforming our world? We keep talking about digital transformation. We talk about how software is being used, how technology is being used in day-to-day day-to-day life. I actually wanted to focus a little bit on social impact side of technology. How are we using technology for fundamentally doing good for us, for our nation, for our world, and the environment in which we live in, and especially the SDG goals that are being impacted with the advent of technology. There are few key topics or few key use cases that I would want to talk about. But the principle is talking about technologies like artificial intelligence, computer vision, blockchain, sensor, drone, data. How is all of this impacting us, and how are people around the world leveraging this technology, and how is it impacting SDG? I'm not sure if many people know about Sustainable Development Goals. United Nations had a major calling globally, and they came up with a framework of 17 important goals. The nature of this was, is fundamentally bringing the world together and focusing them for the next decade in solving some core problems that we see around us. So these 17 goals, and I would like to take a moment talking about these, are impacting everyone, whether it's a developed nation, whether it's a underdeveloped nation, or a upcoming economy. These 17 goals are truly based to uplift us as humanity, and kind of focus on the core root problems that we have every day. So let me talk about this for a minute, and I do want to speak about all the 17 goals. I'll take 5 minutes and talk about each one of these individually. So in 2019, the UN Secretary General called a global mobilization of a action. And truly, they broke it down into 3 parts. They said, global action, which basically meant, get all the global leaders to come together, align themselves, and put themselves behind these goals, and make an effort to to bring in resources, to come up with innovation, come up with smarter solutions to solving these problems and achieving these goals. No problem can be solved without local involvement. So the second part of this was local action. What this meant is, while UN as an organization can rally all the global leaders and come up with these goals, how are we getting the local people, local authorities, government bodies, nonprofit organizations, everybody to align with these goals, and align their policies, align their budgets, and get behind solving these problems. So that's the local infrastructure. The third part into this is people. UN rallied around and said that the only way we can solve these problems is getting the youth involved, getting our civil society, our media, our politicians, our everyday public involved in this process, and holding our authorities, whether they are local government or they are state government or your country, people in authority, people who influence policies, hold them accountable to make sure that we achieve these goals. So that in itself was a major action that UN did. And these goals, they had a fundamental target that by 2030, we are way ahead with these goals. We have fundamentally solved most of these goals or have achieved significant impact to these. So I've been talking about these goals. What exactly are these? So I'll take a small pause here. These, while these SDG goals, we keep talking about these are important. These have been, there's so much of effort, thought process, and technology, policy initiatives behind each one of these, that it's extremely important to look at these and understand these, and these affect us on a day-to-day basis. I'll quickly go over them. The number one goal is no poverty, reduce poverty or eliminate poverty worldwide. Zero hunger. No person in the world should be hungry. Good health and well-being. Everybody should have the right to a well-balanced and a healthy life. Quality education. Everybody in the world has a right to quality education. Gender equality. The movement towards making sure that gender equality is in the forefront. Clean water, sanitation. Focus on basic infrastructure to make sure that everybody has clean drinking water. Basic sanitation need. Affordable clean energy. This is a major portion. In fact, I'm going to use a use case here talking about this. The impact of clean energy to our environment is so huge that there is a lot of emphasis on this. Right to work. Everybody needs a decent job. Economic growth. Contributing towards economy, making sure that everybody is part of that. Industry, innovation, infrastructure. We'll talk about that a little bit today. How technology impacts, innovation brings about social change, social impact. Reduce inequalities, whether it's gender, whether it's race, whether it's economic, whether it's social. The goal is, remove day-to-day inequalities from our life. Sustainable cities. There's a lot of initiatives worldwide about sustainable cities and communities. Responsible consumption, production, stopping wastage. How are we using technology to anticipate capacity, to understand consumption, and to avoid wastage. Climate action, major impact. Everybody knows that there is a phenomenal impact to climate going around. Climate change is real. What are we really doing to do our part in solving the climate problem? Life below water, life on land. How are we working with our ecosystem and ensuring that we live in a world where we are taking care of everybody around us? Peace and justice, strong institutions, and partnerships for these goals, the last two goals in SDGs. So these 17 goals pretty much drives are the major focus for UN over the next 10 years. So our topic is technology. I spoke a lot about SDG and UN and Sustainable Development Goals, but what does this have to do with technology? The reality is technology has transformed so much over the last few decades that there is a significant shift and impact on our day-to-day lives. Like I said, there is a lot of innovation happening every day. There's a lot of focus on digital transformation. Especially you guys in India, you have seen that at the grassroots level with the Aadhaar card and biometrics and and things like those. So there's digital transformation happening everywhere. What I want to focus today is, like I said, two parts. What major technologies today are impacting social change, social impact, and are affecting SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. I want to talk about these a little bit. I'll focus on few key ones. Obviously, I'm not going to do a deep dive into the technology itself. I want to talk about use cases, data that exists, and how are we leveraging, and what does this really mean to us, and how does these technology impact change. So the ones that I want to talk about is AI. Everybody has heard AI, machine learning, computer vision. These are terminologies that you hear on an everyday basis. What does that really mean? I'll take a moment, talk about AI, because the next decade or next few decades of technology innovation is built around AI. And my simplistic definition of AI is a computer program that mimics cognitive behavior of human. If you, in plain sense, a program can only behave based on what you program it for. A software will function based on what the software is intended for. AI is a program which mimics a human behavior, human cognitive behavior, in terms of starts learning from experience and problem solves how a human does. It starts self-training, it learns, looks at it, changes its course and reacts based on information that it has. Again, it is a significant innovation that's going to drive technology growth for the next few decades. Drones, reason I want to talk about drones here is because I'm talking about few use cases where how drones are effectively used today. Drones are nothing but these are unmanned aerial vehicles which can be used for various different purposes. A drone can be literally something that will sit in your hand, or it can be a large unmanned UAV. So there's different versions of these. Reason I like to talk about this is somebody in a grassroots level can get hold of a small drone and can use it to gather data that otherwise is impossible for somebody like a person to get access to. Sensors have been there in an industrial sense for a long period of time. Sensors are devices which monitor, which gather real-time data and can react on it, react based on it. You can have light sensors, which, when there is somebody in the room, the light can switch on. Motion detectiveness, there is smell, there is, temperature, there's so many different varieties of sensors available. So how are we using these sensors now combined with other technology to kind of get the innovation that we need? The last part I want to talk about is blockchain. Everybody knows, a lot of people know blockchain, because they know Bitcoin. But blockchain behind the scenes, Bitcoin uses blockchain. Blockchain is an infrastructure which is a peer-to-peer decentralized ledger. Reason it is extremely useful is because it can be used for bringing in transparency and security for everyone because of its decentralized nature. So these are the four major technologies that I would like to talk here today about. I know I spoke about SDG, I spoke about technology. Here is a quick 2-minute video that I would love for you guys to listen to. Let me know if you can actually. Let me check. Give me 1 second. I'm going to check why you're not getting any. All right. I'm guessing this is not working. Let me try.
We face extraordinary challenge. 9.5 billion people alive in 2050. We don't know how we will. Education.
There are serious problems with the environment. There are serious problems with bigotry. There are serious problems with poverty and starvation. And so far, we've been unsuccessful in figuring out a way to fix them. I'm hoping that AI can adjust the various factors in a way that maybe can solve these problems.
The real opportunity for
how we can actually help the 7 billion people that could benefit from these technologies in a practical way.
We can't take AI as general magic. It is giving us 4 tools to start putting in place systems that we know will help with key issues like hunger, famine, epidemics, overall health of the community.
AI often in the time we have to solve the problems.
We are now applying artificial intelligence to the art of farming, a very old industry, also adopting the latest in technology. So through artificial intelligence, a farmer can now integrate massive sources of data, whether it's data from the combines, it's weather satellite data, it's data from the fields, taking all that data together and through an artificial intelligence solution, actually making recommendations to the farmer on how he can increase the production of his land.
AI has enormous capacity and potential to solve problems that require an enormous amount of computing and pattern recognition that human beings struggle with.
The way drugs are going to be designed in the future, and again already starting to be, is by having models of the molecules and how they interact, for example, with, say, the virus proteins, and then doing a search to find the best drug for the best problem. I think this, for example, how we're going to cure cancer.
By 2020, you should be able to walk into your doctor's office. Your doctor should be able to sequence your entire genome, take that along with your medical imaging data, compare that with the world's data of genome sequences and medical imaging data. From that, determine the matches between your tumor and others, what the treatments were in those other cases, and the outcome. Did the patient survive or not? And from that, devise for you your personalized treatment, and do that entire process in just one day. It's completely possible through artificial intelligence.
The UN summit and its goals excite me, in particular with the idea of leveraging what I would call sleeping giants of data. We have accumulated so much data in the world, and with some refinement and some tagging, this data can become available and leveraged to address famine, to address human trafficking, to address vicious cycles of economic poverty.
If you make progress in AI, you make progress in all these different tools at the same time, right? So better machine learning algorithm, if I invent it tomorrow, it'll make for better medical diagnosis, it'll make for better self-driving cars, and who knows what else.
AI is potentially the most powerful technology that we've ever created, and it's going to create the next form of civilization. It's not happening in 10 years or 15 years, it's happening right now.
So, so going back to the reason I wanted to talk about that particular, that particular video is, again, the goal of highlighting how we are using these technologies for some real life use cases. I have 2 or 3 different use cases that I want to talk about today. Very interesting, food and agriculture. Based on some of these technologies that we spoke about, AI, data analytics, sensors, IoT, the amount of work that has been happened in agriculture industry and food industry is amazing. In advanced nations, the level of usage of data and usage of AI has been great, but I'm also amazed to see fundamental changes in how farmers do their business. How farmers do their business and how they leverage technology in small villages, like small villages around Gujarat and Bihar and places like those. Again, I'm amazed at how some of these technologies impact. In the video, they were talking about data points, the sheer amount of data that is captured in various different sources today. There is prediction that by 2050, there will be 4.1 million data points that would be captured on an everyday basis that can be leveraged to make significant impact to SDG goals, as well as things like farming. So I want to talk about few use cases here for agriculture. Using AI to understand pest infestation, diseases that can occur in large farms, usage of sensors, for day-to-day farmer. Supply chain optimization, how are we leveraging AI for optimizing supply chains, distribution, price, predictability, market predictability, things like those. Reducing food waste, how are we using computer vision, simple technologies like video image analysis to understand food consumption patterns, how are we consuming food on an everyday basis, and how are we, how can we reduce waste. My favorite topic is increasing yield. How can farmers increase their yield by using some basic technology? So that's my first example here. So there has been again worldwide, there has been a lot of usage of technology for increasing farm yields. There is a term called precision farming, and precision farming is focused on understanding behavior of crop, whichever crop you are yielding, and using technology to obviously increase yields. And I have a very good example of this. But if you go back, to the early century and look at some of the advent of things that were happening, obviously when agriculture was basically, you had tractors and plows and horses and animals being used, and that was pretty much it. As we progressed, we had genetically modified crops. In fact, India as a country has actually did not solve the food issue because of genetically modified crops and things like those. Over the last decade, you had GPS tracking and you had more automated robotic machineries and things like those. What the future is shifting from where we are to using more integrated data. Drones, I spoke about drones. My favorite example of usage of drones, and I've actually seen this live here in California, and also a wine farm in France, where drones have been used to understand and get an aerial view of the crops, and understand and analyze images to figure out areas within the plots of the farm, to understand where there is pest infestation, or even looking at gathering data which says, this part of my farm has a higher yield than the other part of my farm. So optimizing the process of understanding how your farmland is laid out, and which parts can be more can produce better yield than the others. Satellite data, the biggest usage of satellite data today, especially in India, is weather patterns, understanding macroclimate, microclimate, macroclimate impact to farms. A farmer with a mobile app, can make a lot of decisions, and doesn't really need a lot of technology. It's not like we are asking these farmers to buy computers and do their own analysis and all of that. A lot of this is offline and is provided by is provided by agencies and other organizations that are helping these farmers. Sensors, deploying sensors to understand, again, weather patterns, and to understand diseases, things like those. There's a lot of usage of sensors. Geospatial data, that's another key element that can be used for understanding yields. So here, again, as an infrastructure, as tools, it looks great. How is this affecting people in India today? And you'll be amazed to know that there are tons and tons of pilot projects, but then there are projects which are well ahead in its execution mode, and people have seen results. I took 2 or 3 examples, but if you Google for it, you will see that India is actually in the forefront of using some of these technologies and are actually seeing some results. And I know it's around I think it was around 5,000 farmers who were the part of their first pilot program with Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka that used a advisory board which advised them on literally telling them when is the best time individually to different groups of people, when is the best time to sow the seeds. A lot of people, were apprehensive about it. They said, how does that make any difference? And a lot of farmers said that we've been doing farming for hundreds of years. How does this affect us and help us? But the reality is Microsoft and ICRI SAT, which is a organization based in India or based in Asia, I guess, International Crop Research Institute for semi-arid, tropics. It's a pretty well-known organization. What they did was they took, data from various different sources, climate data from 30 years, from 1986 to 2015. Data was analyzed using AI. They created what is called a moisture advocacy index, MAI. This moisture index was used to find when is the best time where the soil moisture to meet the potential water requirements for these crops. When is it the best time to sow the seeds, or when is the best time for starting their basic harvesting process, or when is the best time to make changes or put fertilizers or use some organic nutrients and things like those. So using weather data, using past historical data, using the geospatial information, these organizations created an advisory board. Again, people will say like, okay, but what about the poor farmer? How does he get this information? This looks great. The rich farming industry will be using this data. But in this case, literally, there were farmers who got a WhatsApp message in their local language, in Telugu and in Kannada. They got these messages with information. So it was as simple as owning a phone or an app and getting information, and that specific data said that they had 30% increased yield. So a farmer who owns 1 acre of land, who generates the yield that he would normally generate, a 30% impact meant a significant financial impact to some of these farmers. The second example I have is pest attack prediction. Again, Microsoft is one of the leaders in this. There's IBM, which used its Watson for data analysis, similar stuff. They formed. There were 10 advisory groups that were formed that helped these farmers, especially in Andhra, Telangana, and Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh, for receiving automated voice messages. And these messages would indicate risk of pests, infestations, diseases, especially weather patterns, crops that were affected by changing weather patterns, things like those. So again, first of its kind. I think the pilot was done 2 or 3 years back. Extremely successful. And the third example in this is, and the reason I wanted to talk about this is, Karnataka was one of the forefront in using, price forecasting system. They used predictive analysis. They used an AI-based model for price forecasting. Using commodity pricing, especially tour, which is, Karnataka is the second, largest producer, using a predictability model that could tell them at least 3 months in advance, what the pricing could be. And, the entire impact of doing getting access to these kind of forecasting models down to the last person in the chain. So this, I really find it useful to know that while we talk about innovation worldwide, India is experimenting a lot in these areas. The second example I had, and I'm looking at my watch, we're in 40 minutes here. The second example I have is blockchain. So there is a refugee camp in Jordan. Again, the reason I bring this up, the agriculture use case is mainly a use case which affects at least 6 or 7 SDG goals. Here, the usage of blockchain for a refugee camp, and this is a massive refugee camp. It's a 75,000 people refugee camp in Jordan, which is around 7-8 miles away from the Syrian border. They were the first UN-based organization or UN-funded based organization which used blockchain for humanitarian purposes. It's amazing to see these use cases. So what they did was they used blockchain to manage their inventory. And there is a program called World Food Program, which is being managed completely on a Ethereum, which is a blockchain infrastructure. And so that was the first part of what they did. They also implemented a iris-based biometric facial recognition, computer vision-based system, which is a cashless model. So in this photograph, you see, in fact, that guy's name is Bashar. He can walk into a food store in the refugee camp, pick up the stuff that he needs, and literally a eye scanner can be used as a payment method. And the impact of this again is twofold. One is there is no middleman involved here. There is a lot of fraud prevention. There is a ability to make sure that the rightful owner of entitlement gets his share. Things like those are huge UN mandates. It ensures that the UN SDG goal of no hunger is met by using these technology. Other than that, these refugees who left their homes had the ability to regain a legal identity when they were brought into this system. So this is another significant use case of how technology like blockchain and computer vision, iris recognition and facial recognition can be used significantly for meeting some of the SDG goals. Here are some more use cases. There is every industry where there is where a blockchain can be used fundamentally to bring in some change. In education, we've seen usage of digital identity, trust, transparency, just the provenance of or the origins of whatever is being tracked. Supply chain is another huge industry where blockchain is making a significant impact. In fact, the food industry, there are metrics out there where data exists, where the percentage of counterfeiting, the percentage of fraud labeling, the percentage of a false ingredient, or overall just the provenance of where a certain source of food came in were being tracked. So blockchain has has, significantly solved not only the supply chain side of things, but the other side of things, in ensuring that the quality standards are high and fraud is lower. Governments are using it, all over. In fact, I would highly recommend to Google. I think it's Estonia. Estonia as a country is flaunted as one of the most highly adopted nation in terms of blockchain. So you should check that out. Agriculture, I spoke a lot about AI and data stuff, but blockchain is another piece where there is a significant usage. And I spoke about health, EMRs, digital identity compliance. Apart from that, there are other things. I actually worked on a project which was an oil cleanup in Niger Delta in Nigeria, where we were using satellite data to understand oil cleanup initiatives that was being done, and whether the different oil cleanup initiatives were actually making an impact, were actually being done at the grassroots level, and then using blockchain to ensure that the local people were truly paid, things like those. So there's again, there's a lot of usage in Africa when it comes to blockchain. This is, and I'm doing a final we have another 5 or 6 minutes. I do want to talk about microgrids. Microgrids is another significant piece which helps us solve the SDG goals of clean energy and sustainable energy and cheap energy that we can get. Again, India is, there are many microgrids all over the world. There are few in India that have gotten significant prominence because of what they were able to achieve. In my example, so taking a step back, microgrid is my simple definition is, instead of relying on large energy provider and sources completely, your day-to-day lives are dependent on an energy grid. Individual communities, villages, creating a set of enabled, powering their own, becoming self-sufficient using these, sources, like using solar to charge in batteries, and these are micro solar stations. In a lot of these cases, they had the ability to send in power back to the grid, and as such on revenue on that. So example here is a small village in Bihar. They were able to power somewhere around 240 villages, 44,000 households, and bring electricity down to a flat rate because of these microgrids. Anywhere between a $30 rupee per month to a 60 rupee a month kind of microgrids. There are 3 other major initiatives that are being done in India, where these microgrids, I mean, truly the vision is, if especially the rural areas, if they are highly adaptive to microgrids and solar panels, and if these solar panels are subsidized and are made hugely accessible, a lot of our rural infrastructure will start sustaining itself, and and basic needs of electricity, infrastructure, not just commercial but residential too, will start to get solved. So these were my top 3 use cases. I can go on and on. We only have an hour here, but I would highly recommend everyone to look up technology usage and how we are impacting what I call social impact. You will also be amazed at the number of social impact entrepreneurship that are there in India. For example, there is a organic cotton farming community in India, and there is a farmer, Sushil Kumar, who had a 3-year journey to migrate take his fertilizer based cotton farming to a completely sustainable organic farming. And he was featured in a global meet where he spoke about how he influenced 3,000 farmers using WhatsApp to change their farming behavior. Go from fertilizer based to completely natural and sustainable based. So there are tons and tons of examples of grassroots level changes, people who are using basic mobile phones to make a change to how they've been doing things, and in general impacting social change. I know that's all the time we have. I wanted to end this with my favorite quote, which is that ours is a unique generation. We have the ability to do two major changes. Ours can be the first generation to end poverty truly, and we are at a critical phase where we are pretty much the last generation who needs to solve the climate change before it's too late. We can't leave these social changes to our next generation. By then it will be too late. So with that, I hope this session was informative. I can take few questions. I'll check chat and maybe answer a few questions here. So there was a question about whether and I'll make it a general question instead of being specific to a sector. How can we pay for some of these things that we are talking about? They truly, especially in India, a lot of these projects are funded by NGOs and organizations and UN subsidies and grants. But the reality is that it's a cycle in nature. It's an ecosystem where you need a little funding to get started. The moment you get started, the cycle turns into a the yields that you get out of your cycle. That's what causes you to start becoming self-sufficient. There was another question about there's a question which said in our country it's still in introduction stage, but the very problem in size is huge implication in application. True, we are a big country. While the nature of the pilot programs that I spoke about are small in nature compared to the problems and the population, the reality is the infrastructure exists and our ability to adopt is really high. The cost required at the grassroots level, the cost for the farmer to get access to making these changes or to those villages to get access, is not that difficult. It's about looking at pockets and growing from there. That's more important. I'm going to skim through this. There was another question about and I kind of lost the question there, but I thought the question was about fertilizers and other usage. I would again highly recommend people to look into organic farming. Google for organic farming, Google for better cotton of there's a organization called Better Cotton Initiative, BCI. And that's just one example. When you look at how we are making changes from moving from traditional fertilizer based natural nutrient base, and these nutrients exist in our environment at low cost today. It just requires time. So for these changes to happen, it just takes a lot of time for these changes to happen, and it doesn't change overnight. So what is required is having the patience to see this over a year or 2 years to actually significantly see the impact of some of these changes that we are talking about. So I'll be mindful of time. I think we are out of time, and I'll be happy to consolidate some of the chat questions and respond later. And with that, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. This topic is very close to me, and I would love to to hear some feedback. But again, thanks for the opportunity. Thanks, Principal. Aruna ma'am and Divya for arranging this, and I'm glad I got to speak here. I'll give it back to you. Yeah, thank you.
Warm greetings from SDM. Warm greetings from SDM College of Business Management in Bangalore. I would like to extend my sincere thanks and appreciation to the resource person, Mr. Rakesh Hegde, who is Head of Global Customer Success, edcast.com, California, USA, for accepting our invitation and delivering insightful talk on the topic, Tech for Good, using technology to make a better world. Thank you, sir, for taking our participant to the amazing world, which has created new waves and avenues among the participants. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to our principal, Professor Aruna P. Kamath, for guiding and encouraging us to organize this webinar. Special thanks to Mrs. Madhumati Madam for her constant cooperation and support. Credit goes to Mrs. Divya Uchil for successfully organizing this webinar. Thank you all dear participants for registering and actively participating in this webinar. Last but not the least, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to all my faculty members of SDMCBM for their support. Once again, thank you one and all. Kindly note, feedback link will be sent shortly to the WhatsApp groups, Meet chat box, as well as YouTube chat box. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.